The Symphony of Canterlot, Chapter 9, Rituals and Madmares. Pages in Stories bookshop, probably around 10-12 p.m. Sometime later, after washing away the revenant blood off of my fur coat and mane, placing the damn whiskey bottle in a ruined iron chest that I kept in my closet, and finally removing the trinket out of the sewn-shut coat pocket, I began to ready myself for some risky temporal surveillance. So, if you're wondering what that is, I'll just explain that in a minute or two, but I had another matter to deal with first. I was in the study with Bloody Mary, looking around for anything out of the place. Mary herself was just sitting on my desk, smoking from the last box of Jade Dragon cigarettes that I kept inside Uncle's desk in case I felt lighting off one in the face of my untimely demise. You know, truth be told, I hadn't smoked since Nightmare Moon crippled me 10 months ago. I recovered in 3, but Dr. Zing, alias, would have brought upon me a fate worse than death. I had started damaging the right lung he worked so hard to fix for me, and that thought was certainly enough to help me quit. Trust me on that one. I was saving those for a special occasion, you know, I said with a bit of disdain. That was true for the most part. Jade Dragon tobacco, that's hard to come by.
I don't know, love. Cheating the Reaper seems like a good enough excuse,
Mary said with a somewhat cheery and flirtatious tone, the kind that gives the cherry boys a lump of ice in their stomachs and makes stallions' hearts melt in their chests. Sorry, but I just had my ribs hastily regenerated, and I was nearly crushed in a magical gravity field, so I'd rather not do anything that would impair my ability to recover, I responded. I then made the mistake of looking. I only said that she was sitting on my desk because I could hear her breathing from there, but she was actually lying on her side, lazily taking a drag of her cigarette while looking at the picture I had been keeping in the same desk drawer that I kept to my Jade Dragons. Her straight sword wrapped in a black coat cutie mark was visible due to the angle at which she had gracefully placed her shapely rump, while the golden locks of her long mane and tail spilled over my desk, not to mention her velvet red fur. And that was icing on the cake. If there was ever more a devious method of torture, I wasn't aware of it yet.
What, love? Cat got your tongue?
Mary said, more normally this time, interestingly enough. That's one way to put it. I'm actually wondering, what did you do to your black flat cap and trench coat? I said with actual curiosity, despite the fact that I was also trying to avoid the fact that seeing her without her trench coat in that position on my desk left me somewhat dumbstruck.
Oh, it's on your bed. You aren't thinking of having me sleep on the floor, are you?
She responded nonchalantly. No, that would be my place if I ever do sleep tonight, I said. There was a slight smile at that. Her mind was certainly in the deepest of gutters. I'll be analyzing that thing for the better half of the night, I said, pointing at Madame Octavia's cello sitting in the corner there. Naturally, Mary responded the way I had expected. And as she said that, with eyes closed in frustration, I telekinetically swiped my picture back from her right forehoof. A second later, she noticed that she didn't have it. Mary slightly frowned at that and said,
You are terrible.
There was some slight sarcasm there, but it was all in good fun. And you're being intrusive, I responded. There was a short, awkward silence. Mary decided to break it by asking,
I take it that those are your friends?
I responded immediately. Yeah, they were my friends. I still think of them as so, though.
I'm sorry I asked. You're right, I was being intrusive,
she said with a twinge of regret and sorrow in her voice. It was the kind of bitterness that you get when you accidentally hit a child or make fun of a deceased loved one without knowing that they were dead to begin with. No, it's alright. You're part of this now. It's about time that you actually knew. Master Yip, Dr. Bronze Savage, and Rocketeer Wrench died. That is known worldwide, and they supposedly died in a tragic accident involving the collapse of a possible Atlantean temple that they were exploring. And that is a load of crap. We made it up. Her eyes slightly opened wider at that. The world isn't even ready to know what we really did them off. They were things that were brought to life with an infamous grimmer feared throughout the ages in the minds of a mad pony backed financially by the Thule. Things that were made in inexplicable ways. I sighed at the memory. I could have really used a drink then and there, but I needed to stay sober. 3 of the world's greatest murdered in ways that I'm not comfortable mentioning to this day. And to make it worse, they got away with it. And half a decade later, they show up again festering old emotional wounds. And then, they tried summoning Nightmare Moon and succeeded, only for Nightmare Moon to leave and do as she pleases, and all of that for her to end up being stopped by a teenage magus and her group of friends. I may have rolled that off with a slight twinge of bitterness. Sue me for being disappointed. You would think that an ancient evil would have resisted more than that. Mary's mouth hung open at my confession, and being a former trained spy, she can tell that I wasn't making any of this up. She then pulled herself together and asked,
Wait, so what happened to the other 3?
I answered. Yearling and I had a fallout after the incidents. Sakura decided that her adventuring and heroic days were done for, and left to do research in the Everfree Forest. As for Redheart, she and I got close. Mary blinked twice at that. But she decided to stay away from any further complications in her life. I haven't heard from her ever since. I've been in relative hiding, and we ended our relationship in mutual terms, so there must have been a few other saps since then.
Alright, let's make it quick then.
She said. Excuse me? I said.
What? You think that was gonna scare me?
She responded in kind. Well, no, but I figured that your self-preservation would outweigh any need to uphold the contract that you have with your client to stay close to me. She immediately reacted to that one.
How do you know that I'm not just infatuated with you?
She said with half-lidded and seductive eyes. I responded with the obvious. Well, because you're smarter than that. If you weren't, I wouldn't trust you to get to the cavalry, and if you were against me, you would have already killed me in the shower. I did leave the door unlocked after all. Mary sighed with her head down, blowing some tobacco smoke to the floor with an expression of exhaustion.
Alright, horn boy, go do your thing, and I'll go raid your pantry for coffee.
She then jumped off of my desk and then left to do exactly that. Chapter 10. Octavia's 13th Symphony, The Yellow Court of Kings. After drinking 4 cups of coffee, eating my only 3 tins of cocktail peanuts, and eating 4 diced and sautéed potatoes with black pepper, I made the potatoes, she only had 1 cup and 1 ration of sautéed potatoes, and she refused any more and insisted that I needed the calories and the caffeine to use my magic if I wasn't gonna sleep. She wasn't wrong, but I felt like it could have been that, or it could have been that the paltry heating the potatoes with oils that I call cooking was too terrible to stomach. I mean, either way, I'm fine. After that, Mary went to write a few letters using my desk, and me, I went and gathered what I needed. A mortar and pestle, a few dried poppy flowers, and the strands of Madame Octavia's mane. Alright. That should do. I ground all of that up with a mortar and pestle and then sat in a meditative, full lotus sitting position. I then pyrokinetically lit the contents of the mortar, inhaled the fumes, and began the spell. This little trick would allow me to see the most prevalent memories of Madame Octavia, as long as she was still within the city limits, of course. I was inside a mare's body, and an earthen mare at that. I cannot describe how alien I felt being her, experiencing what she did. I then receive a flash of the experiences from that day. The brutal beating from her mother, with force and magic, unnatural in a unicorn. And then, blackness. It took longer than I thought to reach my home. I was used to taking a carriage when I was forced to travel long distances. I knew as soon as I saw the royal guards approaching me that my parents had gotten them involved. They likely believed that I had been dragged away and raped in an alleyway. I suppose they weren't really far from the truth. I was just glad to have riled them up, and now I just had to face the music. I steadied my resolve as I walked up to the mansion, and no matter what happened, they could not take last night away from me. Whatever punishment that they planned, I was still their prodigy, their ticket to fame. They couldn't injure me to the point of missing orchestra practice. My father's career as a conductor had been declining, and my mother hasn't written a decent piece of music in years. I'll be okay. I will emerge stronger. I will see Vinyl and Lyra again. The song I had composed and forgot at Vinyl's apartment came back to me. I opened the front door to the mansion and saw the butler waiting, and he was frowning. At least I could focus onto the music, and for once, it would distract me when I needed it most. I followed the butler to my room.
Butters, how bad?
I asked the butler. He frowned and closed the door silently, awaiting my father. At least the butler wasn't really mean to me, even if he wasn't really nice. I had never been so grateful for his neutrality as when I had broken the rules. The door opened, and father was first to visit me. He walked in calmly as if he had simply forgotten his reading glasses, and he stood there, staring at me, waiting for me to beg forgiveness. I would not give him the satisfaction. I rarely did. After a suitable amount of time had passed, he spoke. I had a dog when I was a child. It was unruly and never obeyed any pony. It kept getting into trouble until finally it crossed the line. My father ordered me to get rid of it, for his patience had run out. I took it into the backyard and bashed it in the head with a rock. It cried out for pain, for I lacked the strength to end it cleanly. It looked at me, pleading for forgiveness, but the time for mercy had passed. I had no choice but to continue to beat it until it died. I spoke up as he turned and started to walk out.
Aren't you going to ask me what happened last night? How about you have one of your servants beat me for you? I didn't go get screwed last night to watch you slink out like a cow.
My father stopped. He didn't even have to turn to face me. The words caught in my throat. My rage at him turned to fear in a split second. Do not test my patience. I love that dog far more than you. To say his reply scared me, that would be an understatement. I need not to ponder it long. I could hear my mother coming from clear across the mansion. My bed was right behind me. I could have scrambled under it like I had as a filly. Instead, I stood fast, my spirit prepared to weather the storm, determined to prove that they could not control me. The doors opened in a red glow that matched my mother's horn. Windows across the room vibrated when she slammed the door shut, and my mother was accompanied by only a red bow tie.
You insolent little whore! How dare you run off in the middle of the night, on your knees!
She screamed.
Screw you and your coward of a husband!
I was cut off, as expected, by the bow tie. It chinked fast around my throat, and the constant reminder of my submission to my mother.
How dare you? You will only speak when spoken to. Open that vile mouth again to insult me, and I'll rip your tongue out. Now, where the hell did you go last night?
I felt the bow loosen slightly, allowing me enough air to speak. I stood steadfast on my hooves and answered.
I went to a bar and got rutted. It felt amazing.
The bow tightened back up. I stared straight in her eyes, grinning. The rage building inside of her felt liberating. Finally, she would know the kind of hatred I felt for her on a daily basis. Finally, she would understand how I would not be caged.
What bar?
She spat. The bow tie loosened, allowing another precious breath of air. I stood there, smirking, and maintained my silence.
What bar?
I felt a sharp crack as something collided with my temple. My vision blurred slightly as my ears rang. The bow tie pulled me back up to my hooves, and she was waiting for my response.
A mare nailed me.
I felt the bow tie tighten for the final time, and I knew she was done playing my game. She closed the distance between us in a fraction of a second, punching me in the throat with her hoof. I felt the urge to cough and gag, but the binding around my throat held the airway shut. The next shot was to my jaw, sending me back to the floor, and I could taste the blood in my mouth and just let it pool.
You mud ponies are less than useless. I told him to let me abort the pregnancy. We could have had another child. But no, it was too late. His parents knew about the baby. He couldn't disappoint his parents.
She kicked me in the ribs. I didn't know I could have had the winds knocked out of me while her grip sealed off my lungs. She hoisted me up to my hooves and released the bow tie to allow me a breath. I inhaled sharply through the nose, quickly exhaling and spitting the blood out of my mouth into her face.
Burn and tartar.
Something heavy hit me on the back of my head, and I don't recall what, but it knocked me out cold. It went black as night. The stars in the sky appeared before me, and I was surrounded by space and the cosmos itself, and then I saw it, a figure, looking like a pony from a distance, covered in golden, was it yellow? Either or, robes. As it came closer, I realized that until the robes lay a mass of yellowish tentacles and that it was facing down, and then it rectified by raising its head. A blinding golden glow enveloped me without mercy, and then pitch black. I opened my eyes in a blind panic, my heart racing at a rate that brought an ache to all of my body, my vision becoming more blurry as it continued. I fell back from my sitting position, convulsing. Sometimes I was on my throat. I tried clawing it out with my forehoofs to no avail. And I could hear Mary trying to talk to me. I could feel some pony injecting my neck with something. My eyes rolled back and in a violent cough, I spewed onto my fur what must have been 3 coffee mugs worth of blood. And then my heart stopped, and there, I guess it felt like I died, but I wasn't really sure. I haven't really died before.